welcome back to The World is Storytelling with me, Ronni, and this time I'm with the fabulous Dr. Lalith. Now, the podcast The World is Storytelling is here because I love stories, and I think that stories are a very powerful way of affecting change in the world. So this episode is slightly different. I didn't climb a hill, but I went to a flat in South London and met with Dr. Lalith, who is a fantastic person and someone who is using storytelling in a way which really fits in with the ethos of this podcast. I found it fascinating talking to him, and I'm sure you will all find it fascinating to listen. Oh, and here's a quick joke for you all based on the contents of this episode. I had to go to the doctor the other day because I had hemorrhoids. Yeah, I was itching to get it over with. Thanks very much for listening and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
So tell a story, one that is true. Yeah.
A group of doctors that I did my very first job with, and we worked in a hospital called in Hemel Hempstead in Hertfordshire.
Okay, yeah.
And so we call ourselves hemorrhoids, not hemorrhoids. We call ourselves hemorrhoids. And so on the hemorrhoids group, of course, some of us are men, some of us are females, so it's a mixed group. But the partners of those who are hemorrhoids are also part of this group. Okay. And so the men amongst them have the dad jokes, and some of the women really love the dad jokes.
Would you say there's piles of dad jokes in
Piles of dad. Very good, very good. I bought my daughter a handbag from Iraq. She said, "Thanks for the bag, Dad."
Hey!
Seen in a supermarket cheese stall. Sweet dreams are made of cheese. Who am I to disagree? I cheddar the world and feta cheese. Everybody's looking for Stilton.
Wow, I've been serenaded as well.
We're a musical bunch, the hemorrhoids. What did one duck say to the other duck that was bending over? What? I can see your butt quack.
Hey!
Well, my name is Lalith. I am 47 years old. I live in Vauxhall in London. But we are actually calling from somewhere in between Stockwell and Clapham North in London, which is about 45 minutes walk from where I live. And the reason why I'm here is I am cat sitting. Now, many people who know me know that I do love nature and I do love animals. But if I have to think of a domestic pet, they would probably associate me much more with dogs than they would with cats. So
Which is why you have the dog mug.
I have the dog mug. And in fact, one of my good friends, David, his nickname for me is Pug. Okay. And I found this pug mug, and before we started recording this, I actually sent him a picture, and he wrote back saying, cozy. But my nickname for my friend David is Teddy, because he is short and rather cuddly. Okay. But the reason where Pug came about was because I'm from Sri Lanka, and I'm one of three boys, and I love genetics, and when I look at my father and I look at my two older brothers, they very much share the kind of genetic, like they've inherited quite a lot of their physicality from my father, and they are very, what I would say in South Asian terms, Dravidian in origin, which is very south, angular features, darker skin, and things. Whereas my mother, I've inherited a lot of my features from my mother's side, and my mother's side is kind of rounder, kind of balder head, not so sharp angular features, much rounder features. And my father used to call me and my mother the ones with the pug noses, like the flat noses, because compared to them with their very sharp Greco-Roman noses, we were the flat, kind of more Bengali, Pacific Islander type of look. So there you go. So I digress. The story, I am much more dog, and I look after my friends' dogs, and I love big dogs, and I cannot lie, and I love Labradors. I love to be able to let them run free and walk with them and feed them, and that's my way of showing love. both. Quality shared time and feeding them, but exercising them at the same time.
Oh, of course.
And so cats are different, I'm sure, and I do not want to insult any people who love cats, but they are far less needy, they are far more independent, they don't need so much from you, and maybe call me shallow, I just like the kind of attention of having a dog. So make no apology, I'm a dog person. So the reason why I'm here is because of a cat. And so why? And so the person whose flat that we are in is a gentleman called, let's call him R. So yes, Mr. R is a lovely man. And Mr. R is married to Mr. A, and they live here in Stockwell, and they have a cat. Now, unfortunately,
what's the cat's name?
I don't even know the cat. This is how irresponsible and disinterested I am. I don't even know the damn cat's name. But what I do know is that I've met her before, and she is a Burmese cat. And interestingly, I've learned from this cat's owners that the Burmese cat is actually much more dog-like in its demeanor and its behavior towards other humans, in that they like more cuddles and more tactility and things. So in a way, that was, I kind of like that. Interestingly, at another time when I came to visit R and A in their home, the normally aloof cat came and perched on me when we were watching a film together. And my friend thought this quite unusual. He goes, you must have some high vibrational energy. But it's interesting. As a pediatrician, I've noticed this before. Children seem to gravitate towards me, and so do strange animals. They just seem to feel that I am not phased or calm around them. And maybe it is something to do with vibrational energy. But for whatever reason, strange animals and small children seem to gravitate towards me. It must be high vibrational energy. So Mr. R, unfortunately, has got a close family member who is in the late stages of a terminal illness and is living outside of the UK. And so when Mr. R needed to go back and spend time with this first degree relative, he asked, would you mind cat sitting for us? And of course, if it was a dog, I'd be like, no problem, yes, absolutely, do this or that. Cat, I kind of like hesitated inside, but of course, to support anybody who needs to be home and spend time with their family, I will do what I can. And so when you said, are you free to do a podcast, I said, well, yes, but do you mind recording it in somebody else's flat with a cat? Do you have any allergies or phobias to a cat who's probably likely to be asleep, but also possibly could vomit at any time? But anyway, we've already had a vomit 2 days ago, but hopefully not another one.
There's nothing like a sense of jeopardy.
Yes, nothing like. But also that kind of squelch of the retch and that splat will be quite good for audio, don't you think?
I do think, particularly, is it more? My experiences with cat vomit have been more like hairball-y.
Oh, yeah, like
yeah, and then but it's kind of dry. What was the vomit like?
Oh, this was quite moist.
Moist. Very moist. Okay.
I remember I was sat here doing a call, and I turned to look, and I had the kind of, and I turned to look, and then it was a torrent of fluid. Yeah. Wasn't pretty. Didn't smell great either. But again, it reminded me of life as a pediatrician in an emergency department where you're covered in all sorts of bodily fluids from children.
Yes.
From the front, from the back.
From the top.
From the top. Or everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. It just comes up from everywhere.
And I have to make there's a huge parallel between veterinary medicine and pediatrics.
Less hair? In pediatrics.
Less hair in pediatrics, but it depends if you get like a grumpy adolescent teenager who's very
That's a good point. Yeah,
true.
Fair.
But generally, with the younger patients, it's akin to veterinary medicine. Most of the time, it's difficult to communicate verbally with your patients. You rely on the story or the observations of the carer, and you have to be very opportunistic in how you handle, touch, and stab your patients. So there are a lot of parallels. So in Sri Lanka, historically, dogs are not really favoured. Most dogs are stray, and those who are domestic, when I say domesticated, they're not necessarily treated so well, because the purpose of the dog, one of the reasons of having a dog, is for security. And so you got to keep them a bit savage. And so many dogs, when I was growing up when I visited Sri Lanka in the 70s and 80s, my relatives who had dogs, often these dogs were kept in cages, and would bark ferociously at strangers, and people wanted that. People wanted that kind of ferocity. So beware of the dog, do not approach. And so there is often a fear around dogs in Sri Lanka, and for that reason.
Understandably so.
I remember when my mother was in her 70s, and as part of her 70th year, we wanted to do a trip down memory lane. So go visit the important places in different chapters of her life. My maternal grandfather was a lawyer, and one of his first kind of senior appointments was as district judge in a town called Balapitiya, which is in the southern province along the west coast. And being the district judge, you are given a bungalow, and where you and your family can live. And so my maternal grandfather had worked as an advocate in the law courts in Galle, which is one of the big cities in the southern province. And so his first provincial appointment was district judge of Balapitiya, and given a bungalow. So we moved his young family, of which my mother was the eldest, there. And so my mother and my aunt had often described, we said, we remember in our childhood being in this bungalow in Balapitiya on the coast directly of the sea, with 4 high big windows with the sun and the thing of the sea. And they kind of wax lyrical about this romantic idea of being a kid growing up in this lovely bungalow by the sea. And so we thought we should try and revisit this place. Of course, it's quite difficult with politics to kind of get access to district judge bungalows and things without security, but somehow managed to do it. Now, this is post-tsunami. So in Sri Lanka, the bungalow itself, unfortunately, had been damaged significantly by the tsunami, but the structure was still there in that location. And so the district judge currently was living in a little annex just outside, but the old house was kind of in not ruins, but damaged by the tsunami. Yeah. And so when we went in, accompanied by the police, the local police, of course, because it's the district judge's house, things like that, lo and behold, for security, there is this kind of pit bull bulldog cross. And looks pretty savage, and was there right at the front of the house, chained. And the policemen were very clear to my brothers and I and my mother, like this dog is savage. And again, me wanting dogs to run, again, my very Western attitude, well, dogs wanting to run free and be happy and joyful and rollick around in the grass together, that's my kind of utopian vision. I wasn't, again, I have no fear. And so I went towards this dog. You could see all these people shitting bricks, going, oh my God, he's going to approach the dog. And this dog looked at me and kind of growled. And then I kind of went and just stood there, again, almost like a St. Francis figure, just stood there, and the dog just kind of knelt down, and I approached it and kind of offered my arm. He smelt it, and then just kind of playfully started gnawing at my arm. And you could see all the police people and my mother losing their thing. And this dog slobbered all over me. I sat next to the dog and things like that, and the people couldn't believe it, because this savage dog was tamed by a complete stranger. And so that was one of a really memorable moment to say, look, these animals just need to be left to be in their own devices and be how they meant to be, as nature intended. And so that kind of whole phrase of "as nature intended" is something very, very dear to me, and I want to be able to connect with nature in a way that, of course, is safe. Don't get me wrong. And what I described perhaps wasn't the safest thing to do, but deal with nature as nature intended. And so, that was a great moment. But then going back to dogs that know me, when I'm away from the dogs that I dog sit for, I'm away from them for many, many months, and then come back and visit, the dogs never forget. And when they recognize you, and the joy that they have when they recognize you, I don't know, you can't replicate that in many things. Yeah, what I do now is I work with stories. And when I say stories, I do not mean fictional stories. What I mean are what we say true personal narratives.
Yes.
I'm very interested in the kind of, like what you said about anecdotes. I'm very interested in people sharing anecdotes, but not just sharing what happened. It's looking at how did you feel about what happened and why is that important to you? And why could this be relevant to others? And so it's almost this kind of use of our own stories as a form of personal reflection. But I want to use that in lots of different ways. And so I set up a storytelling consultancy called Behind Your Mask. And the reason why I call it Behind Your Mask is because we all wear masks of some form, whether it's personal or professional. And if we think about masks, and again, my heritage is from the southern province of Sri Lanka, and on the northern part of the southern province, on the west coast, there's a place called Ambalangoda. And my father grew up in a place inland from Ambalangoda called Batapula. But Ambalangoda is very famous in Sri Lanka for the carving of these very intricate and colourful masks, which were used for kind of for spirituality, to ward off demons, in kind of exorcisms and for plays, and so for lots and lots of reasons. And so, of course, the symbol of a mask is very important. But many people wear masks for different reasons. Yeah. Masks to take on a different character. You know, in a theatrical way. And so if we think about, we take on a role. The other thing that masks can do is masks can conceal. And so that we are hiding behind a mask, not really revealing who our true authentic selves are. Yeah. And the third reason why people wear masks is to protect. And there can be a duality in this, in that people wear a mask because they're protecting themselves from revealing and from the judgment of revealing their true selves, but also it is protecting themselves from external threat and judgment. Yes. And so there is a duality to the protection. So masks, people think that we wear masks to protect. We take on a role, but we also conceal. And so, yes, there are many advantages to wearing a mask, but what I want to do through stories is to highlight the advantages of getting behind that mask and maybe taking off that mask. And why it actually relates to my own personal adversity while working as a doctor. And as a paediatrician, there were many cases in my career where I faced many ethical or complex challenges. One case in particular was when I was working in children's intensive care in London. I was looking after a 12-year-old girl who had a condition which warranted a bone marrow transplant. She received the bone marrow transplant, and unfortunately, which can be expected, her body rejected the bone marrow transplant. But the rejection of this bone marrow transplant was profound, like significant. And if I can describe graphically that bone marrow transplant rejection can be horrible in terms of uncontrollable bleeding in many places of the body. But if I can just describe physically what she looked like that she'd been dipped in volcanic lava, in that she had shed all of her skin as part of her body's severe reaction towards this bone marrow.
Wow.
In my opinion, while being one of the doctors who on the night shifts having to look after this patient, I believed this was a case of what's called medical futility, which means a no-hope situation, that no matter what we did, that we are not going to bring back this child to a condition that would have a tolerable quality of life.
Yeah.
And I was the one who kept, at every morning ward round, saying this, questioning the decisions of my seniors. Why are we doing this? Why are we prolonging this child's suffering? Should we not be shifting our management towards a more humane palliative care situation rather than persisting and pursuing trying to cure her? And I was persistently shouted down. And so being the junior doctor being made to do something against my ethical principles of advocating for the safety for children, I felt that I was actually complicit in torture. And so this had a profound effect on me and my mental health. And I ended up going to see my GP thinking that I had a brain tumor because I had brain fog, slurred speech, severe headaches, and this was very, very difficult. And I spoke about my maternal grandfather, that district judge. He died in his 40s from a brain tumor. And me saying how much I looked like my mother's side of the family, I was thinking, oh my God, this is me. And when they said, actually, this wasn't that I was normal and I didn't need a brain scan and maybe this is work-related stress, I was quite indignant. I was like, no, I've dealt with stress in my life. This is not stress. And when I finally went to the occupational health therapist and went through and talked it through, she identified that actually it's that case that's triggering you, and this is something called moral distress or moral injury, causing these deep emotional wounds because you, as a healthcare professional, are unable to deliver the care that you think is right for your patient, and that can be absolutely profound. And so the therapist suggested that I go to something called a Schwartz round. And a Schwartz round is a psychologically safe space with healthcare professionals where they can share the social and emotional impacts of their work. And so I went to this Schwartz round and I listened to other healthcare professionals, including doctors, about some of the traumatic events that they've faced. And I thought, this is really interesting. Maybe I could do that. And so like a couple of months later, I volunteered to share my story about that case of the bone marrow transplant girl, which I did. And when I did, I got this unexpected response from very senior anaesthetists, psychiatrists, and surgeons who said, you have articulated something that we have experienced in our career, but never had the bravery or the eloquence to say out loud. And again, which made me think about hiding behind your mask, suffering behind your surgical mask or your mask of infallibility. And that is what really thought, I want to do this to help other healthcare staff.
Now you work with things which are particularly about words. How does that go together? Going from this as you describe it, pediatrics, where there's less words, it's more, vibrations, to a world where every word is imbibed with meaning and character.
I disagree. I would actually say that the practice of medicine, particularly with the dealing with patients and families, is a lot about words and is a lot, ultimately, about story. Because when you see a healthcare professional, it is, tell me the story of your headache. How long, how often, anything else. Give me the context of the story of who you are and let's us make. So it is, and we say it is called taking a history. And so, yes, it is about words, but also, as you say, it is about non-verbal communication. And also not just non-verbal communication, it is what is not said. And particularly in pediatrics, and as somebody who is very passionate about the advocating for children, particularly when it comes to safeguarding and the recognition and response to all forms of childhood abuse, it is what is not said that is equally as valuable. And so the whole art of communication, I would say that many people think that, to be a doctor, it's a science. And I agree. You have to understand chemistry, you have to understand biology and all of the things and be numerate. And so there is a scientific basis to the practice of medicine. But the delivery and implementation, execution of medicine is a social science. It is a human art form. And so I think it's very important that all of us, in healthcare, recognize, and particularly those applying to be in healthcare profession, that, your maths and physics and chemistry is not the only thing that will hold you in good stead in your practice as a healthcare professional. You are dealing with human beings, and dealing with human beings is a social science and is almost an art. Speaking of end of life and death, there are 2 deaths which actually are relevant to my business. And so one of them was the suicide of a junior doctor in orthopedics. He was the son of my travel buddy. His father and I traveled a lot long haul because his wife has got healthcare challenges and is not a fan of long haul travel.
Right.
But I am. And so off we go together. And so I have known his son for many years. I knew when he was at school. I helped him apply to medical school and into his orthopedic training. But a traumatic event at work was one of the triggers, and I don't want to simplify suicide in any way, but one of the contributing factors to a post-traumatic stress reaction to a very traumatic event at work.
Yeah.
And so, again, reaffirming the need for spaces and opportunities for professionals to share the social and emotional impact of their work, not only for themselves, but also with their colleagues. And then the second death that really affected me was the death of my very good friend from school, who I'd known since primary school in Hong Kong, and her name was Jessica. And her and I have been very, very close. And during the pandemic, when she saw that I was doing this storytelling to support through Schwartz round training and things to support staff during the pandemic, she was like, "This is you. This is what you should be." She goes, "I've always thought you were wasted as a doctor in an emergency department. You're engaging. You get story." And she quoted to me. I remember she goes, and the irony was that she said to me, she goes, "You know, I hope that you die before me, because all the stories that you remember about me of when I was fat when I was a kid will die with you, because nobody else remembers stories like you, and nobody brings them up as much as you." And so she recognized my kind of joy for all sorts of humiliating but also poignant stories.
Yes.
And she said, "That's what you should be doing. This is you. We want you to, you need to be doing more social media. You need to be kind of sharing stories. You should be connecting people." And she, as a true businesswoman, was almost planning out a business model. She goes, "I want you bare-chested in a sarong with a stethoscope around your neck, sharing stories about foreskin to yummy mummies." You know, that was her vision.
Well, now I want to hear that story.
Now you want to hear these stories, yeah.
Particularly, but yeah.
But yeah, so when she unfortunately died unexpectedly of complications from surgery for a brain tumor, I thought, this is the universe telling me something. Her wish for me was to do more stories, be more engaged, be more community facing rather than firefighting in an emergency department.
Yeah.
You know, the death of the junior doctor made me realize there is a need to support the well-being of staff who deal with ethically challenging or traumatic situations, and not just healthcare, education, the police, law firms. We are all wounded emotionally by our work in some way, and I felt that I needed to take this approach of reflective spaces, personal reflection on whatever it is that you face in your work as a way to heal.
And I mean, I'm obviously a great believer in storytelling for that and for many situations, but how do you see storytelling as helping with that healing?
So I think it's important that in our very busy world, we don't often take time to pause and reflect.
Yeah.
So I think the very act of looking at your own story to reflect is healthy. Many people think and criticize me and what I do, saying that isn't what you do just living in the past and being fixed in the past? And I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that in order to move forward, you have to acknowledge your past. And many people feel that particularly if something is traumatic, that they will box it away, bury it. And in fact, it sits there and festers. And when you start getting symptoms or behaviors of things that are out of kilter and something's not quite right, it's often that fungating abscess that you have locked away.
What a great word.
That is the problem. Yeah. And I am somebody who wants to open that box, face some stench, put a scalpel into it, and let that pus out. Because then once you do that, when you lay open an abscess, that's when it will start to heal, when you expose it and give it air. And so that is just one thing. It's actually the bravery to approach those traumatic events. The second thing is when you actually share that, or admit that that what happened to you and the effect it had on you to yourself is also an act of bravery. But this is compounded when you share this in front of others, because so much of our wound is when we feel that we are suffering alone, that this happened to me and nobody else, or this thing happened to me but it affected me like this, but everybody else seems to be fine and getting on with it. But what you don't realize is that chances are, if there are people who have had a shared traumatic experience, for example in healthcare, working on a particular patient during a pandemic, the intensive care nurse who looked after the same patient as me, we have a shared experience, and we may react to it in a different way, but we have experienced it. And you may be surprised at the similarities in the responses to that trauma. And so the act of sharing in front of somebody else will empower them to perhaps share some of their experience with you. And that kind of reflection and projecting back, that resonance, that acknowledgement of the shared experience, I feel is almost like a balm. It is almost putting some balm over this exposed, jagged wound or fungating abscess, which the pus is leaking out of. And that is what's going to allow it to heal. And so the power of stories to not only engage people, you can educate people, you can invite people into your world, particularly if people have got a very different lived experience from you. But when they can find some commonality in your experience, or it resonate because they've not had that particular experience, but a parallel experience on a similar theme, that is what creates connection. And so this brings me to this point of what is health. Physical health is our body, mental health is our mind, but what is social health is our quality of our connections, our relationships with our loved ones, with ourselves, to nature, and with other people. And so I feel that storytelling is a very good medicine to promote and bolster our social connections. So as I discussed before, one of the whys of my business related to a junior doctor suicide. And of course, knowing my own experience of, emotional distress and psychological trauma from my work, I realized that actually we need opportunities to pause and reflect. And so I met a former consultant of mine who I'd worked with when she was at the kind of middle stages of burnout. And then she found me on LinkedIn saying, I have a distinctive name and surname. She was like, are you the person who works in such and such a hospital? I'm like, yeah. She was like, I'm seeing all your work. It sounds amazing. Anyway, so we just had a chat and connected. And she was talking about her idea of running retreats for doctors. And she is very nature oriented. She knows all this stuff about birds and plants and seasonal change. I call her the wise woman of the forest. And so I said, wouldn't it be great if you kind of do the kind of of course, coaching and building and nature connection. You bring somebody else who kind of does the kind of more body stuff, like the kind of yoga and nutrition and things like that. And what I can come and do is the story stuff, where you use kind of reflective stuff. So over like a 4-day residential retreat, they'd have really nice new food, body and sound baths, personal coaching, connection with nature on an organic farm, and then daily storytelling circles where you could say this. So that's what we did, and we did this specifically for a doctor audience. And so we've been running these for a number of years at an organic farm in West Berkshire, in a town called Lambourne, and the area is called Sheepdrove, and it's a lovely setting. And you have your ensuite bathroom, and you just meet like-minded doctors, and some people come with very traumatic stories. But what I do is, as somebody who is a healthcare professional who understands the profession, who has been there, I find a great privilege to be able to kind of support these doctors in sharing very vulnerable stories in front of each other. And we've had some very traumatic stories, and but at the same time we've had some really joyful stories, because we need to think it's not all doom and gloom. We need to celebrate the full kaleidoscope of the human emotions. You know, I've had stories about people remembering the time that they felt joy was when they played the recorder at school, and how can I balance this in my work-life balance now? You know, and honestly, months later they've like joined a medieval recorder group. You know, and then we've had, an anaesthetist talk about just working during COVID and just death after death after death after death, and what that can do to you and your mental health. So it has been so powerful to be able to kind of support these doctors. But on the back of this, having done this for over 3 years now, everyone kept saying to me, you should write a book. You have got so many stories from so many different doctors, from so many different specialties. And so again, going back to the why of my business, one of them was a junior doctor suicide. I've been pitching loads of ideas to BBC Radio 4, and something stuck. And one of them was around my oral history contributions during the pandemic with the University of Manchester. They did an oral history project called NHS Voices of COVID-19. It is now archived in the British Library. And Radio 4 was looking for quality audio archive, and I put forward that I have 30 hours of audio archive about what it was like as a paediatrician during the pandemic and see what children came in with. And so I contributed to that program called Lockdown Legacy, The Medics. And off the back of that, I pitched more ideas, and one of them I pitched was Doctor Suicide. And it got commissioned.
Wow, what a big and important topic, but one that you're grasping the nettle in such a beautiful way, and I'm so glad that you have this connection with that world and with the nature side of it too. You know, perhaps to add in, we called the storytelling a social lubricant, but I often think of nature as this intrinsic lubricant that enables us to connect and ground with ourselves and with other people. So when you connect with people in nature, it's so much more natural than connecting with other people in perhaps an urban concrete space.
And just to build on that, yes, my colleague who runs the retreats, she takes people on walks and tells about the trees, and they have meditative pauses in nature and things. But I also say our storytelling circles, one of them runs indoors, which is in an area called the Rook's Nest. So it's a circle in the round with bean bags, and it's gorgeous with natural lights and everything. Our final storytelling session takes place in the boathouse, overlooking a jetty with a lake. So that's really gorgeous. And depending on seasonal weather, one of the storytelling sessions takes place in the herb garden, which is this stone-walled garden surrounded by all these kind of tall natural herbs. And so, again, storytelling in nature, it's akin to what we have been doing for millennia, by a campfire, regaling stories of our wounds when we hunted the buffalo or whatever it is, It's akin to that. It's going back to basics and doing the thing that we've been doing and connecting as humans. Because as you alluded to, in this world of artificial intelligence, we say that, as the machines get better at becoming machines and machine learning, we need to tap into what makes us better humans, which is our humans and our human experiences and our emotions. And so I feel that is very, very important to tap into what makes us human. And I think stories are a great way to do that.
It's a beautiful and also more positive way of looking at it. I think there is, and I'm probably guilty of this myself, a lot of pessimistic thought about where we are now as a humanity and as a society, and to highlight what we've neglected in the past and the opportunities that are coming up now. That's a very, very lovely way of looking at it. When I first came, an hour ago, to chat to you, I had a very different idea in mind.
What was your idea
of the podcast?
Oh, okay.
No, the currently I was with a colleague of mine. We worked together with on storytelling, co-author of my book. We were discussing 2 days ago in Amsterdam about storytelling in a world so defined not just by AI, but by our current methods of communication or miscommunication. And we threw around this idea of maybe making a new season of my podcast around that and talking to people what storytelling means to them in that world. And I think even without me bringing it up, you've spoken so much to that, and that really, it's beautiful the way you describe storytelling as being this element of this social health, and also perhaps I'm thinking of the term lube.
Social lubricant.
It's a social lubricant.
It's a connector.
It's a connector, but it's also this balm, a way, and, that some lubricants are both cooling and soothing, as well as
healing,
as well as healing, but also facilitating connection. So it may sound like an odd thing to say, but you almost think to yourself, wait, hang on, lubricant, how can it slow things down as well as speed things up? But it can. It has that power. And I would say that storytelling, and you describe it so well, has that power too. And in a world of dystopian disconnection, we require these stories and these very human existence stories, because we are humans, we're living in a world of story, and we need to bring those up, and it helps to bring those up. Before we finish, what were you saying about foreskins?
As you can imagine, there are many communities around the world where the majority of males are circumcised versus those who are not. And so working in communities where the majority are circumcised, when you find children who are uncircumcised, there can be a degree of public health education that could be done. And so what my friend was saying, and she's North America, grew up in North America, where many males are circumcised, and so she was saying it would be really good if you could kind of almost do like stories about foreskin, and the story of a patient with this type of problem with the foreskin, the story with things without, and almost, she says, like, almost like a debate about, circumcised or not, cut or uncut, and, just make it fun and engaging and, medical and serious, but also kind of lighthearted and things like that. She thought I had the right type of personality to do that. So, yeah.
I'd say you definitely would. Do you know the book The Foreskin's Lament?
No, I don't.
You should read it. I mean, it's not just about foreskins.
It's funny, one of the things I talked about was actually I've got a bald head, and so I said, people say that I look like a Malteser, and Maltesers are brown, they're smooth, and they've got crunch. That's me.
And they come in ever smaller packets every year.
It's bite-sized, easy to digest.
Yeah. Shrinkflation? I don't know where I'm
high risk type 2 diabetes, but anyway.
I'm sure we can.
Sorry, medical joke.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lalith. And I really appreciate this. Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. In the time since we recorded, there's been a few changes. Momo the cat, that was its name, unfortunately died shortly before Mr. R's brother's funeral in April 2026. The Hemorrhoids continue giving over their WhatsApp dad jokes, and Dr. Lalith's BBC Radio 4 documentary on Dr. Suicide, File on 4 Investigates, is scheduled for broadcast on September the 1st, 2026. Have a listen. I'm sure it's going to be extremely powerful. Thank you again, and have a lovely, lovely day.
Some say the old ruins in the sand tell us every story will come to an end. But my dear, we can live what we tell. We are storytelling animals.